Hamilton's qualifying struggles this season for Ferrari are becoming a massive problem for the 7-time world champion. It was roughly 3 years ago that Fernando Alonso accused Hamilton of being an idiot who only knows how to drive and start in first, after the two came together at the Belgian Grand Prix. That was never really a fair comment, and Hamilton this season has just about managed to hold his own, despite never being anywhere near the front row during the Grand Prix. But he certainly hasn't been setting the Tifosi's souls alight with his incredible driving. For fans of Lewis, who started to blame Mercedes for his struggles, his performances have come as a pretty serious disappointment. His lack of pace compared to his teammate is starting to be called a crisis. However, an ever-reliable inside source at Ferrari has revealed what the problem might be and how Ferrari are planning to resolve it. Today, I'll check out the inside story on Hamilton's struggles and what the consequences of his Mercedes exit have been, so don't go anywhere. Alright, we're 5 races into the season, and let's be honest for a second, the hype about Hamilton's move to Ferrari probably got a little bit out of hand. Having dominated the sport for the majority of the turbo hybrid era, it seemed almost impossible that he was at fault for his and Mercedes' struggles during the first 3 years of the ground effect era. How could a driver go from being that good to being so average? It seemed impossible, really. Mercedes fueled that narrative as well, with their statements about how it was their fault they didn't understand the car, and their apologies publicly to Hamilton. That apology letter that the team released at the start of 2023 after a relatively disappointing Bahrain Grand Prix was a particular low point. The letter was them grovelling to their fans to give them more time to provide Hamilton with a better car, after he finished what apparently was an unacceptably low 5th place. God forbid that should happen. It got a little bit out of hand, to be honest. I think that's probably fair to say. Maybe more than a little bit out of hand. It got a lot out of hand. But when the move to Ferrari for Lewis was announced and the Italian team put together a title challenge in 2024, the expectation became that Hamilton was going to come to the Scuderia and return to being a regular podium contender. Now yes, some people did try to temper the expectations of the many by saying things like he would need time to adjust and settle into the new team, but let's be realistic. The expectations were still absolutely astronomical for a driver who had just finished 7th in the Drivers' Championship, behind his teammate, and had had the worst season of his career. After 5 races this season, he finds himself 7th once again, behind his teammate once again, and with no real positives to take away. Last season, after 3 races, he said it was the worst start to a season of his career. If you look at the first 3 Grand Prix this year, not including the sprint because there wasn't one in the first 3 weekends last season, this season is even worse. What's worse than all of that is that without him, Mercedes finally look like they're making some improvements to their car. The car looks consistent. George Russell has 3 podiums in 5 races, and the questions are now being asked. Was Hamilton leading Mercedes astray with his feedback? It's an interesting question to ponder, but it's one that's probably impossible to answer. There's just too many variables that you'd have to take into account to ever get a real answer. But it is looking like his preference for a car that will transfer weight under braking, allowing him to turn on the front axle, just doesn't work with the current regulations. To get him comfortable in the car, Ferrari have had to run their car so low to the ground that it becomes illegal, as we saw with his plank wear disqualification in China. And that's not the first time under these regulations that Hamilton has been disqualified for plank wear. The same thing happened in the United States a few years back as well. Now, while Hamilton hasn't been on the pace at all, especially in qualifying, Charles Leclerc gave the Scuderia their first podium of the season in Saudi Arabia, giving us an indication that the new Flaw that the team fitted in Bahrain has actually improved the car. And the key to that result from Charles was twofold. First was that he managed to extend his first stint far further than anyone expected, so he had a much better tyre advantage in the second stint. And the second part was the middle part of the race. In Bahrain and Jeddah, the Ferrari came alive in the middle part of the race as the fuel load started to burn off in the car, reducing the weight of the SF25. When the fuel in the Ferrari reduces to a roughly 75% of what's needed for a full race distance, the weight reduction seems to settle the car into a much better operating window, And that is when the two drivers find grip and balance and they can finally start to push it. However, even when the car does start to settle and Hamilton does start to find some pace, he's still at a disadvantage to Leclerc. The 7-time world champion is starting to feel the effects of his underwhelming performances, and he started making statements like, "At the moment there's no solution, and perhaps it will be like this for the rest of the year." The shine has very much worn off this move. Comments like that sound very familiar to the frustrated and fed up Hamilton who was ready to leave Mercedes last season. Qualifying is where the big issues are though, with Lewis almost a second off pole position in Saudi Arabia and over half a second behind his teammate. Gazzetta dello Sport, who are an ever-reliable source of all things Ferrari, revealed part of the reason behind Hamilton's struggles. They said that the changing ground clearance as a car's weight changes as fuel burns off is the secret behind the terrible qualifying performances. With an empty tank, as soon as a car tries to tackle the slower sections of any track, where mechanical grip is much more important than aerodynamic grip, the car just goes into crisis mode. The new Flaw that they added in Bahrain has limited the problem, but Ferrari still need to do a lot of work to find speed on a flying lap when their weight is the lowest, so that they can get better qualifying positions and hopefully give themselves a better chance in the races. Both drivers are at a disadvantage because of that low speed struggle that they're currently experiencing. But Hamilton not having the faith in the grip that Leclerc does through the medium and high speed corners means the 7-time world champion has absolutely no chance of keeping up with his teammate, never mind the fastest cars on the grid. Once the car gets some weight in it on race day though, and the drivers aren't pushing to the absolute limit all the time, the Ferraris both find some performance and the gap between Hamilton and Leclerc closes up. At the moment though, qualifying is tough for both of them. But with Hamilton only driving the car at 99% of its potential, while Leclerc is at 100%, the difference between the two is obvious. Hamilton's arrival at Ferrari hasn't perhaps had the impact on the team or his own fortunes that the Tifosi or Team LH were hoping for, but his exit from Mercedes has certainly had an impact there. Since George Russell's arrival at Mercedes, he has understandably been in Lewis Hamilton's shadow. It would have taken some incredible driving on the young British driver's part to not be in Hamilton's shadow, probably some of the best the sport has ever seen, to be honest. Now while Russell is good, he isn't that good. But since Hamilton has left, he's really started to come into his own. This is a pivotal season for George Russell. With Hamilton now gone, he has had to step up and take control of the Mercedes team and really lead them forward. While he's been in Hamilton's shadow, that's let him hide away from the scrutiny of the media. Not this season though. Now he's squarely sat in the spotlight and so far, he's looking pretty good. Over their 3 seasons together, when Russell was paired against F1's ultimate benchmark, he more than held his own. He became only the 3rd driver to beat Hamilton head-to-head in a season in 2022, and then he became the only driver to do it twice when he won out again last season. In 2024, Russell out-qualified Hamilton, a driver with more pole positions than any other driver in F1 history, 19 times in 24 races. Understandably, Russell's feeling pretty good about himself, and in a recent interview, he said that if he'd come to Mercedes a few years earlier, he could already be a world champion. Being teammates with a 7-time world champion for 3 years is not straightforward, George said. There was once a time that if you finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton in a championship or in a race, you'd win the race, or if you'd finish ahead in the championship, you'd win the championship. If my time was 5 years prior, you could argue I'd have 2 championships in my name. That's a pretty big claim from George Russell. It's pretty obvious to everyone watching that Hamilton has struggled in these regulations, with his driving style not matching the cars. But then again, who knows what would have happened? While Hamilton dominated, a new cohort of drivers were coming through. You had Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris and Russell. Who knows what might have happened if any one of those had ended up in the Mercedes in place of Bottas? We'll never know, of course, and common sense would say that nothing would probably have changed, but it's interesting to think about. Do you think Hamilton will ever be able to match up to his teammate Leclerc? And is Russell impressing you more than you expected at Mercedes this season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.